D'accord tout le monde? Bonjour. Je vais faire toute cette présentation en français. D'accord? Ça va? Super. Nous avons des francophiles ici. Espagnol? English? English. All right. Okay. Down. So, how many people here speak French? Just a little bit. You don't know any French? Okay. So I started in French for two reasons. Number one is to remind everybody that Canada is a bilingual and actually a multilingual country. And there's another reason why I started in French, but I'll explain that reason later on. Today I want to talk about the role of language, and specifically the role of language in Canada. I'm going to just speak for a while, and you can ask as many questions as you want afterwards, okay? As Simone said, I'm the Executive Director of Languages Canada, and we have, and I'll tell you all about Languages Canada in a little bit, but first I wanted to just really step back and look at the context of language in Canada. When I say that Canada is a bilingual country, it's and actually multilingual, this all started many years ago when the first European settlers were Vikings, and then many years afterwards, the French came and established a colony in the area that we know as Quebec. And they held that, as well as in other places in North America. And during a war with the British won. And there was a famous battle on the Plains of Abraham in Quebec City. And the French general died. But the English did something very interesting. They did not eliminate French. They said to the French-speaking people, you can keep your language, and we will live here together. Of course, we run the place, we are the authority, but you can keep your language and your culture. And that was the very beginning of bilingualism. Later on, something very interesting happened in Montreal. There was a French-speaking person that was accused of committing a crime, and when it came to the court, he could not defend himself in English. And the judge said, we cannot prosecute this person if they cannot speak our language and if we cannot understand what they're saying. And it became a very important turning point because from that moment on, that person had access to an interpreter. And from then on, our judicial system followed the president and really allowed for access to your language to defend yourself. And that access to your language to defend yourself also later on appeared in healthcare. It appeared in education, until eventually, in our own constitution, we decreed that we are a bilingual country. This is truly amazing. It's very rare for this to happen. You know, one of the unfortunate things that happened is that indigenous languages were not recognized at that time. Now, there's much more openness to that. But that willingness to listen to somebody else in their language and to accept their way of life became a cornerstone for the identity of our country. And this is, our identity is what drives everything else. So that's a little bit of history of bilingualism and why we have English and French in Canada. And it is in the law. We argue about it, we joke about it, we fight about it, we love it, we celebrate it, and it's enshrined in everything that we do. And it opened something else up as well. You know, that little reaction that we had over here from you when I spoke French and when I offered English or Spanish, this is very typical of Mexicans, right? We have, you know, every year we celebrate, we have one day that we call World Student Day, and in the summertime, and we have parties across Canada. And so you can imagine all the students from all the different countries, and the loudest ones are the Mexicans. Okay. They're the ones who are there expressing themselves and dancing and really, they're so loved in Canada, really, really appreciated. And so I want to talk a little bit about that because immigration for us is so important. And I'm not here to promote immigration, but I'm here to talk about the role of language in immigration. Again, I want to step back. I will speak to you a little bit about our programs and what we offer and everything. But first of all, I want to step back because Canada is a country that's built on immigration. You know, in Toronto, the largest city in the country, 52% of the population is immigrant. They're not second generation. They're people who have arrived in their lifetime. Can you imagine if half of Guadalajara had just arrived? It's crazy. When you go to Chinatown in Toronto, you're in China. When you go to Greek town, you're in Greece. And you really have a sense of that. And all of these cultures live within themselves, but also together with all the other ones. And one of the reasons this can happen is because of the bridge that language and integration builds. In Canada, we say language, but this is a very important point. It's language plus. What is language actually for? Language is a vehicle. Language doesn't exist in isolation. It's language and integration. And there are three areas that I want to talk about today in terms of integration. One of them is education. The other one is the labor force. And the last one is community. And language plays such a key role. This is what I do. This is what my members do. We're not there to teach English and French. Okay? We are there, the sentence continues. We're there to teach English and French as a vehicle for your life. That sentence needs to be completed all the time. And one of the biggest mistakes that we make as language educators is to not complete that sentence. I like to equate language with breathing, right? It's so automatic for us. Most of us actually don't know how to breathe properly, by the way, right? Good athletes do, they have to learn. You know, and yogis sitting in the cave, they learn all the breathing techniques, and people who meditate, you learn how to breathe. It's the same thing with language. We don't think about it. So when people say language, I tell you right now, it's not enough. You have to complete that sentence. Language is a vehicle for. And when it comes to, no, you don't have a question? Oh, she's looking for you over here. Okay, all right. All right, so I'm going to speak first about education, language as a vehicle for education. There are two parts that happen with education and with every other part that I'm going to speak to. But actually, I just remembered something. Does anybody know if language on this planet is purely a human creation? Is language a human creation? Yes or no? No. No? No. I don't like technology too much, I have to be honest. No, it's not true. I love technology, and I don't like the way we use it very often. But one of the amazing things about technology, and actually language technology, the Google Translates, the artificial intelligence that's used for language, is they have been able to now, there are scientists that are able to take huge amounts of data and observe the patterns. And through this, and through the reduced size of the equipment that they can now manufacture, they're listening to animals, and we have discovered that animals have words they use. Elephants have a word for this is a good human being, and another word for this is a nasty human being. They actually have words for this. Bats have words that they use with each other. And that's how they were able to determine bats use food as an exchange for sexual favors. They can listen to conversations from bats now and begin to understand, through the patterns of the sounds they make, the words that they're using. Which explains a lot about Batman, right? So I want to point out that we think that we own language. We don't own language. It's part of nature. And actually, to a very large extent, language owns us, because language defines a worldview. And you know this as language people. Languages define a worldview. If I speak English and I stand here, I am going to see the world a certain way. For example, I am well. I am warm. If I stand over here and I say, tengo calor, I'm expressing a possession. I see that sensation that I experience as a possession. When I stand over here, I see the world and myself as experiencing a state. I am warm or hot. So every language has a different way of viewing the world. And we all know that that's the magic of learning, of truly learning a language, is that you get different worldviews. What I love, one of the things I really love about Canada is that there are so many worldviews that you have to come to the conclusion that you are living in a worldview and that there are others. And when you come to that conclusion and you don't feel threatened anymore by that, you begin opening. And you begin opening to other worldviews, and then you begin discovering that, oh, language is beautiful. It helps me create, connect, communicate, but it can also limit me. Learning another language, we know, opens us up. And that's the reason. So, you know, what would happen to an elephant from Kenya if it has a word for a good human and another one for a bad human? And they take that elephant and they put that elephant in India. I wonder if it would use the same, if the Indian elephants would understand it and if it would understand the Indian elephants. Maybe yes, maybe no. I don't think so. But I can tell you one thing that happens with any animal that lives in a herd is that new animals into the herd are not easily accepted. And any of you that work with animals, you know this. A new horse in a herd of horses is not easily accepted. A new elephant in a herd of elephants is not easily accepted. And it's no different with us humans. Right? What happens to us when we go to a place where we don't know the language? Or what happens to us when somebody that doesn't speak our language arrives? It disturbs the herd. When I started today in French, what happened inside of you? What was your reaction? Just a few. Just tell me what happened inside of you. The very first thing that happened. Fear. What else? Confusion. Yeah. So that's the most natural thing that can happen because we are social beings. Language is one of the vehicles that we come to agreements on. We come to agreements on how to be and how to behave as a collective through language. And so, of course, we're going to be afraid when somebody doesn't speak our language. It's the most basic, natural thing to experience as an animal. And this happens every day. When we learn a new language, what we're saying is, in a way, I want to connect with you and with this herd. Right? And this is our role at Languages Canada. This is a big part of our role at Languages Canada, is to help the 150,000 international students that arrive connect with their new herd. This is the single most important thing that we do. We're not really teaching English or French. We're helping people integrate into a new collective. And this is a privilege. It's an honor to do this. Within the context of education, and I want to talk about, as I said, education, the labor force, and community. Within education, I wanted to share something with you it just blew my mind away. There was research done at one of our member programs. It's a language program in a university. I'm not sure if they want me to share it, so I'm not going to name them, but I don't think they would have a problem. The international students that come to that university, some of them graduate at the end, after language and 4 years. Some of them don't. 12.5% more graduate if they go through the language program. So when you have, 100 people graduating versus 112 people graduating simply because they went through the university's language program, it's a very interesting fact for educators. I cannot imagine the rector from a university saying that's not important. It's huge. What's really interesting is 3.5% more graduate of those that went through the language program, 3.5% more graduate than domestic students, than Canadian students, because they went through the university's language program. That tells us something. And it's both quantifiable and it's a quality issue as well, right? It means that our efforts to reach potential students, to bring them, we get more for our effort. And not only that, but the whole quality issue just jumps up. A university who has a higher quality students with better marks is a better university. There is no doubt about that. So what do these students do in the language programs that makes it so different? Don't come to Canada to learn English or French. My members will hate me for saying that. You can learn English or French over here, but come to Canada for integration. Come to Canada for that last step. Come to Canada for that place where you say, I own this. I can function in a French collective. I can function in an English collective. Not only that, I can function in a university or college system that is completely different than my own. And I can tell you it's very different from Mexican universities and colleges. So this is what you come to Canada for. Even if your English is really good or your French is really good, I really encourage people to at least take a small portion in a language program, because it's language and integration. This is where the real value is. And it makes sense. You know, if you come to Canada and through the language program, you get help with your residence, you get help with, this is how you take the metro or the subway or the bus. You get help with your bank account. And really, really important, you begin building a social network. And we all know how important that is for a feeling of safety. And it's that feeling of safety first that allows us to later on to, you know, after survival comes living. First, we need to respond to the question of survival. After that, we live, and then we create. So I really encourage you to come to Canada for specifically that, okay? So language and education, we can see how important it is. Language and the workforce. There are so many great stories and horror stories about people who have or don't have the language skills needed to be effective contributors at work. It's quite amazing. But we know for a fact that productivity increases. We know for a fact that quality increases with the language level of the people involved. So one of the things that we help people do is to prepare them for the workforce by using the vehicle of language to do that. I mean, you can imagine, you know, I've heard horror stories, people who don't speak the language and they have the wrong operation on them because they didn't describe something properly. The construction industry depends on clear language. It's not high level, but you need to, and they depend for safety, never mind productivity. So it's very, very important. And of course, when we go to the third aspect, community, I already spoke to it. We are social beings. We do not live alone. We do not even live with one other person. We live in a collective. I need you, I need you, I need you, I need you to survive. I can't do it alone. So building community and using language as one of the most essential tools for doing so is incredibly important. And in the Canadian context, oh my God, well, in any context, but in Canada, it's a crisis. Right now, we're going through a language deficit. And the reason we're going through a language deficit is because we're going through a people deficit. You know, people are not having babies in Canada. I'm sorry. So, with a population of 38 million people, which is minuscule, the only solution left to Canada is to bring people in. Next year, 475,000 people will receive their landed immigrant status, their residency. That's 1.7% of the population. That's huge. That's enormous. But it's the only way we can maintain. By 2025, it will be 500,000. It doesn't sound like a big number, but again, for our size of population, this is incredible. And all of those people need language. Not all, but many. All of them need integration, for sure. And all of them will require the integration not just into society, but into education and into the workforce. So it is absolutely essential for us in Canada to address the people deficit and to address our language deficit. And one of the ways we do this is through education, of course. We invite people, we welcome people to come and study in Canada. It could be for anything. It could be for a small, short certification program. It could be for an undergraduate or a graduate degree. And then, of course, we're looking for immigrants, people to stay. And we don't have a choice. Mexico is sort of on the other side. There are many Mexicans going abroad, right, to live, to find a new life. In Canada, it's the opposite. We will not remain competitive unless we have more people coming in. And so this puts us into a very interesting dialogue in this room and between the two countries. Because at the same time as we want people to come in, we also want to make sure that the talent is shared, that we have something that we can trust each other and base our relationships on. So it's not an either or, but it's a question that is being explored now by our leaders. It's extremely important. All right, how am I doing with time? What time is it? What's that? Oh, okay. So I'm more than halfway through. Good. I'm glad I've consulted all my notes, right? I'm good. All right. I'm going to leave a little bit of time for questions, but there's one last part that I really want to share with you, and that's a little bit about Languages Canada itself. We are the country's representative for language education. It's not obligatory. So what happens is we have the language program at the University of Toronto, or we have the language program at Georgian Bay College, or we have a private school that has a language program. They can all be members of our association. And the requirements are pretty simple. You have to go through an accreditation by an independent party. All the language programs in Languages Canada, they have to go through an inspection by an independent. What's interesting, the way we've set it up, is we created the standard. The experts on our board of directors, who are all from language education, voted on the standards, and we upgrade them and renew them. So we hold the copyright to the standards, but we will not accredit organizations because we want it to be independent. We want it to be reliable. We don't want any conflict of interest. So all of these universities and colleges and private school language programs, they're all accredited. The other rules are really simple. You know, you have to be good. You have to be fair. You have to treat students well. You have to make sure that the curriculum is kept up to date. All these things are incredibly important, and all our members are part of that. When Simone was at our conference in 2020, February 2020, right before all hell broke loose, right? It was your last trip, I think. Yeah. And it was, I think, no, it wasn't my last trip. I kept on going. But it was really interesting what happened. I want to share the story of the pandemic. We had 210 members at the time. In 2 weeks, all of them switched to online. And our role as an association was to provide the knowledge and support that was needed. This is what we do. We represent our community, and we represent them with the Canadian government. We represent them with other governments abroad. We bring them together to explore, to discuss, to fight. We like to fight a little bit. All these things are very important. So that's our role is really to be a representative body. In 2019, the last year before the pandemic, our members received 150,000 international students for their English and French language programs. Considering that we're such a small country in terms of population, this is significant. And considering that the total number of international students in Canada at the time was 600,000, it is a very significant portion. These students came for different reasons. There were some that came just for the summer programs, right? Just, it's tourism and fun and language. And so they came for 2 weeks or 4 weeks or whatever. And then there are others who were immigrating to Canada. And finally, there were those that were coming for education. And a third of the language students in our member programs are there for education. So they're coming to upgrade their English or French to the required level, and then to move on to engineering or business or culinary school or whatever it is. And this gives them two very important things. It gives them Canadian education, and it gives them language. And the ability to integrate into Canadian society and culture at that point is incredibly elevated. There's something that I wanted to share with you around that, which I forgot. So I'm going to continue with the language programs. The average length of a language program in Canada is 11.7 weeks. All right? And it depends. Some people come for 2 or 4 weeks, but some come for a year of language, depending on their level. And that's the thing that I just remembered I wanted to share with you. One of the things that I love about Canada in our education system is that the entrance requirement to Canadian universities and college in terms of language is one of the highest, if not the highest in the world. In other words, it's much easier to get into a US university in terms of language than to a Canadian university. And I love that. I think it's fantastic. There's a direct correlation between your linguistic ability and your ability to deliver, quality work, to be a quality student. There's no doubt about that. So if you're considering Canada as a study destination, just know one thing, that you're going to a place that puts quality ahead. We're not looking for numbers. We're looking for numbers, we're looking for a balance, but at the same time, we need to make sure that what we are giving and what our universities and colleges are producing is of high quality. There's always a strong pressure for our universities and colleges to lower their language level. And people who don't get language, they don't get it. They think, yeah, why not? Just lower that requirement. It's just language. They don't need it much. And they just want more numbers in. So I am just really proud of how fast Canadian institutions are about this. I think it provides a much better place for students to actually obtain their education. Something that's very different about Canadian education than the US for sure, and some other countries, is it's very homogeneous. When I say education US, everybody thinks of Harvard, sure. MIT. You have the Ivy League, right? In Canada, yes, of course, we have really well-ranked universities, top 20 in the world and so on. But one of the qualities in Canada is that we don't have the top, and we don't have the crap down over here. I'm sorry, but, all right? Ours is much more homogeneous. And the quality education is overseen by the provinces. We have provinces, not states. And the provinces, it's a mess when they have to agree on things. But anyway, it is something that is very, very important. And it's very well funded. Canadian students I think they pay $8,000 Canadian right now per year, which is very low compared to, the 35, 40,000 in the US. International students pay more, of course, but you still pay a lot less than you would in many other destinations. So this is another attractive aspect of studying in Canada. Okay, I'm gonna sort of wrap things up. I hope the information and I hope the ideas that I shared with you are useful. One of the reasons I love coming here is to talk with language people and to share, because we learn, like Canada learns from others. It's very selfish. If you want to learn from us, that's okay, that's fine. But we want from you, okay? So I'm going to open the floor. If you have questions or if you have comments or thoughts, please. There's another microphone here.
Question, please raise your hand. Spanish, French, English? Yes.
I have to represent me or just say that question? I have to represent me or just say the question?
Just ask the question.
I want to know who you are.
Introduce yourself. Sure. I'm Ricardo Javier. I'm from Mesquitic. I'm studying the cultural and normal school. I don't say how to say that in English. Sorry. Yes, that. Thanks. I have a question. What do you think could be happen if in the third globe, in the third planet, we just have just one language, just one global language? All the people talk that, and that's the unique language.
Sorry, I want to understand this a little better. What happens if, tell me again.
If in the world we just have one just language. I don't say quit.
We only spoke one language.
That would be so boring. Yeah, they tried that with Esperanto. It doesn't work. This is the concept of we can control language and we own language and we get to dictate what language is. And we have a very technical word in English for that. It's bullshit. Language takes us and impacts us as much as we impact language. Your language in Mexico, the Spanish that's spoken here, is yours. And it's different in Guadalajara than in Cuernavaca or anywhere else in Mexico. You do not own language. The question of having only one language, for me, is really interesting. Because on the one hand, you think everything would be easier and work much more easily. So why hasn't it happened? There is a theory that the certain essential qualities in specific languages help that language demonstrate something very important about the human experience. And English is one of the easiest languages to learn in the world. With a very low vocabulary, you can communicate a lot in English. If you take French, right away, in English you say, I am Gonzalo. It's a simple statement. I am Gonzalo. In French, je m'appelle Gonzalo. It's already a reflexive verb. That's complicated, okay? So there's, of course, the theory that one of the reasons why English is a predominant language is because it's easy to use. And that gives English power. The other beautiful thing about English is that while you can use a very small amount of vocabulary to really communicate, at the very same time, it has one of the largest vocabulary bases of any language. So it can be incredibly simple, yet incredibly complex. And when that comes into your personal worldview, it impacts you as a human being. But to go back to your question, it's like saying, why isn't everybody the same? It's an impossibility, right? But it's a good question. And I liked your comment about fear, by the way. That was really good. Thank you. A ver.
Good morning.
Hi.
It's not a question. It's like in a talk. Jean-Pierre Adrien, is that the French I know? Adrian. Okay. Please raise your hand. Who from here is an English teacher? Okay. And you open my mind when you question, what are your feelings when I start to speak in French? And most of my partners say fear and insecurity. And just imagine our students as a kids, what are their feelings when we start to teaching English to them? They are kids, they know nothing. And if our feeling it's fear, and it's supposed where we are grown up, we are teacher, we have I don't know how many years of studying English. That question opened my mind to think in my students the next time when I start to teaching English to them.
Adrian, thank you so much for that. There's a lot more awareness in the world right now about trauma. And there's capital T trauma and little t trauma. But trauma is trauma, okay? I was born in Cuba. By the time I was 6 months old, I was on a plane to China. My parents moved there. I lived in communist China for 5 years during the Cultural Revolution, and they treated kids so well. I was in heaven. I could do anything I wanted. The ayas, the women taking care of me, I could go up over here and they would be there holding me. I could run and do anything. I was loved, I was held and cared for. When we moved back to Chile, to my parents' home, all that disappeared. And I didn't know the language. And I remember how scary it was to be in a place where I didn't have the holding, the safety net. So what you bring up, Adrian, is so fantastic. You have to let your students be afraid, but at the same time, be there for them, okay? Absolutely essential. Support them. Who else? ¿Quién más? Aquí.
Ciao, ¿cómo estáis? Yo sono Marcela, ¿y tú? A little bit of Italian, not French. Hi, my name is Marcela. I have a little question for you after this. My partner over here went a little bit to education. I want to understand if what you're explaining to us right now is for our education as teachers to be able to go to your country and learn, or for our students to go learn. My question here is, I want to learn. Do I have the opportunity to go to your country and work, or can I work and study? That's my question.
Ok. Ciao Marcella, io voglio imparare italiano un giorno também. Allora, my fake Italian is excellent. I love fake Italian. My wife used to laugh in Italy when I would go up to people and she says, "You think you're actually speaking with them? They're just being nice to you." I said, "It's working, except for the directions. It never worked. That was horrible." Anyway, thank you for the question. Great question. And the answer is yes and yes. Okay. Well, there are different things. It depends what you want to do. If you're looking for an experience there and then to return, then you can go through a study permit. You can apply to study. And as a teacher here already, you could go and learn French, or you could go and take a certificate program or a longer-term program in something related to your vocation, right? The incredible thing about the situation right now is that students are allowed to work. So the funding for your studies can come from the work that you perform over there. You have to demonstrate an ability to sustain yourself, okay? The country cannot just take people and give money, give money, give money. So you have to demonstrate your ability to sustain yourself and then come and experience that. And then you can decide what you want to do, to return here, to continue contributing over here, to contribute over there. You know, that's very possible. And as far as your students, yes, we want them too, you know. We want them for different reasons. You know, I'm a firm believer on the imprint that an international experience leaves on a young person when they are held properly, to what Adrian was pointing. So when a student comes to Canada and we hold them properly and take care of them, and they return here, it changes their lives. And it changes all of our lives. It changes the life of the Canadian family who hosts them, for example. So the answer is C, E, C. And that was an Italian C. It wasn't a Spanish C.
We have time for one more question.
Yeah. Well, I already have the microphone. My name is Ivan. Sorry. Sorry. Just a quick question. I'm a teacher at an institution, and some students have approached me and they have showed their interest in going into these type of programs, exchange programs. So my question is there any sort of agreement with public institutions like where I work at, which can ease this process of sending students to these type of programs with you?
Yeah. How old are your students?
They're around 18. They're adults already.
Okay. All right.
18, 25, more or less.
Right. So, well, that's what I'm here for. You know, I'm meeting with the Secretario Miramontes after. We've had a relationship for some years between Languages Canada and Jalisco, and the pandemic interrupted everything. I was at Recrea in 2019, but then 2020 happened. So everything was interrupted. So, yeah, we're looking to see what we can build in terms of programs, and I think look to the Secretaría for guidance as these appear. And there is, of course, the possibility of students just going on their own for those that can afford it. And we're working on the possibility now also of exploring the idea of to come, reach a certain level in language, and then let's say you need 3 or 4 or 5 months, and then you work for 6 months, right? Within a very specific language and work integration program. And it's paid work, and it's well paid, okay? So these are things that you should look at in the future. And, I hope to be coming back, and my team to be coming back and just presenting, and maybe we can present in your classroom.
That would be nice. Thank you.
All right, thank you.
We can be a bridge for you and give out information to anybody that needs information.
Look for the cool guy with the hat.
One more quick question. If you promise to be briefed. Thank you.
今はそれは私はあなただよそれに日本語で挑戦します ahora lo reto now I challenge you to do it in Japanese right no it's just I have applied for several programs in Canada and I haven't received any response yet so what is the Just a quick, this is my question. What is the best way to apply for many programs in Canada to live or study there? My goal is to study and improve English because I need C1 to graduate.
Okay, you might have said this in Japanese, but I didn't get it. What's your name?
My name is Angel.
Angel, okay. Angel, and I know you didn't say it in Japanese, but when did you apply, Angel?
I did apply about 6 months ago, and then I applied one more time, and something that I don't know how to say it, but it's called TETE in Quebec to go and work and study there. And it was 1 month ago, and 6 months ago.
Okay, so Angel, on behalf of Canada, I am truly, truly sorry, because one of the things that's happened now is there's a huge backlog of visa applications, and it's really hurt a lot of people because you make plans. So we're working with IRCC, which is the Immigration Canada, to push them to clear this backlog. But that's you were a victim of that. I am really sorry. There's no word is because they haven't finished processing it yet. However, the minister's office confirmed with me that they're close to clearing the backlog. Okay, so I just encourage you to wait or to apply again in a little while, and to see what comes of that. Quebec has a very aggressive program to attract people and welcome people. Tu parles français? No, pas encore, not yet. Yes, okay, all right. So that would also probably be helpful on application in Quebec as well, okay?
Le agradecemos.